The Puerto Rican Campaign was an American military sea and land operation on the island of Puerto Rico during the Spanish-American War. The offensive began on May 12, 1898, when the United States Navy attacked the archipelago's capital, San Juan. Though the damage inflicted on the city was minimal, the Americans were able to establish a blockade in the city's harbor, San Juan Bay. On June 22, the cruiser Isabel II and the destroyer Terra delivered a Spanish counterattack, but were unable to break the blockade and the Terra was damaged. The land offensive began on July 25, when 1,300 infantry soldiers led by Major General Nelson A. Miles disembarked off the coast of Guanica. After controlling the first skirmish, the Americans advanced to Coamo, where they engaged Puerto Rican and Spanish troops in battle. The battle concluded when the Allied soldiers retreated after the battle left 2 dead on the side and 4 on the American side. The United States was able to seize control of Fajardo on August 1, but were forced to withdraw on August 5 after a group of 200 Puerto Rican Spanish soldiers led by Pedro del Pino gained control of the city, while most civilian inhabitants fled to a nearby lighthouse. The Americans encountered larger opposition as they advanced towards the main island's interior. They engaged in 2 crossfires in Guamani River and Coamo, both of which were inconclusive as the Allied soldiers retreated. A battle in San German concluded in a similar fashion, with the Spanish retreating to Lares. On August 9, 1898, American troops that were pursuing units retreating from Coamo encountered heavy resistance in Ibanito and retreated after 6 of the soldiers were injured. They returned 3 days later, reinforced with artillery units, and attempted a surprise attack. In the subsequent crossfire, confused soldiers reported seeing Spanish reinforcements nearby and 5 American officers were gravely injured, which prompted a retreat order. All military actions in Puerto Rico were suspended on August 13 after U.S. President William McKinley and French Ambassador Jules Cambon, acting on behalf of the Spanish government, signed an armistice whereby Spain relinquished its sovereignty over the territories of Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Philippines and Guam. Prelude. In 1890, Captain Alfred Theamain, a member of the Navy War Board and leading U.S. strategic thinker, wrote a book titled The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, in which he argued for the creation of a large and powerful navy modeled after the British Royal Navy. Part of his strategy called for the acquisition of colonies in the Caribbean Sea which would serve as coaling and naval stations, and which would serve as strategical points of defense upon the construction of a canal in the isthmus. This idea was not new, since William H. Seward, the former Secretary of State under the administrations of various presidents, among them Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses Grant, had stressed that a canal be built either in Honduras, Nicaragua or Panama, and that the United States annex the Dominican Republic and purchase Puerto Rico and Cuba. The idea of annexing the Dominican Republic failed to receive the approval of the U.S. Senate, and Spain did not accept the $160 million which the U.S. offered for Puerto Rico and Cuba. Mahan made the following statement to the War Department: since 1894, the Naval War College had been formulating plans for war with Spain. By 1896, the Office of Naval Intelligence had prepared a plan which included military operations in Puerto Rican waters. Not only was Puerto Rico considered valuable as a naval station, Puerto Rico and Cuba were also abundant in a valuable commercial commodity which the United States lacked. sugar. Following the sinking of the battleship Maine in Havana Harbor, Cuba, the United States forwarded an ultimatum to Spain to withdraw from Cuba. In response, Spain broke off diplomatic relations with the United States, and on April 23, 1898, Spain declared war. On April 25, the U.S. Congress declared that a state of war between the United States and Spain had existed since April 20. One of the United States' principal objectives in the Spanish-American War was to take control of Spanish possessions in the Atlantic, Puerto Rico and Cuba, and the possessions in the Pacific, the Philippines and Guam. On April 27, U.S. ships, the Monitor US Puritan, the armored cruisers US New York, and the US Cincinnati, bombarded the Spanish fortifications at Matanzas Bay in Cuba. By July 16, an armistice was signed at the Arbol de la Paz in Santiago de Cuba by U.S. and Spanish forces, ending hostilities in Cuba and its waters. The United States then directed its undivided military resources to Puerto Rico. Two leaders of the Puerto Rican section of the Cuban Revolutionary Party, Dr. Julio J. Henner and Roberto H. Todd, had written to U.S. President McKinley asking that Puerto Rico be included in whatever intervention was planned for Cuba as early as March 10. They even provided the U.S. government with information about the Spanish military presence on the island. Spanish preparations. With the outbreak of war, the Spanish Crown sent the 1st, 2nd and 3rd Puerto Rican Provisional Battalions to defend Cuba against the American invaders, depleting the Puerto Rican troops in the island. The 1st Puerto Rican Provisional Battalion, composed of the Talavera Cavalry and Krupp artillery, was sent to Santiago de Cuba, where they battled the American forces in the Battle of San Juan Hill. After the battle, the Puerto Rican battalion suffered a total of 70 casualties, which included the dead, wounded, MIAs and prisoners. The Spanish-appointed governor of Puerto Rico, Manuel Marcius y Casador, declared martial law, resolving to resist the American forces. He declared, "Providence will not permit that in these countries which were discovered by the Spanish nation the echo of our language should ever cease to be heard, nor that our flag should disappear before the eyes. Long live Puerto Rico, always Spanish. Long live Spain." Marcius y Casador hoped that a grant of autonomy would ensure that Puerto Ricans would remain loyal to the Spanish Crown. American preparations. The Spanish Crown was unaware that, at the time, the United States had successfully infiltrated the island with a number of spies, among them Henry Howard Whitney, Henry Ward, George Bronson Breyer, William Freeman, James Jewell, Frederick Ober and Edwin Emerson, Jr. According to a story published in Century magazine in September 1898, Edwin Emerson, Jr. was pretending to be a German journalist. He presented himself to the German consul in St. Thomas and asked for the names of Puerto Ricans of German descent whom he could interview. Among the names which the consul gave him were that of the Riefkohl family of the town of Mournibo. Upon his arrival in the town of Mournibo, he met 14-year-old Rudolph W. Riefkohl and asked the lad in German if he had a map of Puerto Rico. Riefkohl answered that he did, however it was decidedly too big for Emerson's use. Riefkohl returned home, not knowing that Emerson was a spy, and quickly drew another with a depiction of the major ports and harbors of Puerto Rico. Emerson used the map, and it is believed by some that he may have given the map to the U.S. Army Commanding General Nelson A. Miles, influencing Miles' decision on the landing points for the invasion of Puerto Rico. A photostatic copy of Riefkohl's map was published in the Century article, "The Naval Campaign in Puerto Rico. First Actions." The first engagement between the belligerents occurred on May 8, 1898, when the converted liner US Yale captured a Spanish freighter, the Rita, in San Juan Bay. On May 9, Yale fought a brief battle with an unknown Spanish auxiliary cruiser, resulting in a Spanish victory. Around this time, Captain Angel Rivero Mende was assigned the command of the Spanish forces at the fortress of San Cristobal in San Juan. On May 10, when Yale returned to San Juan Bay, Rivero Mende ordered his men to open fire on the steamer with an Ordnance 15-centimeter cannon. In the first attack against American forces in Puerto Rico during the Spanish-American War. For his actions, Rivero Mendez was awarded the Cruz de la Orden de Mérito Militar First Class. Bombardment of San Juan. The bombardment of San Juan of the First Battle of San Juan refers to an American naval attack on the fortifications of San Juan, Puerto Rico during the Spanish-American War. The American naval commanders believed the bulk of the Spanish fleet under Admiral Pascual Cervera White-Torpede was steaming from the Cape Verde Islands to the Antilles and ultimately to Puerto Rico. With this understanding, Rear Admiral William T. Sampson and a squadron of 10 American warships, the battleships US Iowa, Indiana, New York, cruisers US Montgomery and Detroit, monitors US Amphitrite and Terra, torpedo boat US Porter, 2 unidentified auxiliary cruisers, and an unarmed collier had stood out from Havana at noon on May 2 bound for Puerto Rico. Sampson intended to intercept and destroy the Spanish squadron and then move on to attack secondary shore targets, San Juan's castles, forts and batteries, and was unaware that Torpede had already eluded them and slipped his squadron into the Bay of Santiago. On May 12, Sampson's squadron arrived at San Juan, finding an empty harbor instead of the anticipated Spanish fleet. Making the best of the situation and as an exercise for his untested gunners, Sampson ordered the bombardment of the city's citadels. Captains Ramon Achicamino and Jose Antonio Iriarte were among those who defended the city from Fort San Felipe del Morro. They had 3 batteries under the command, which were armed with at least 3 15-centimeter Ordnance cannons. The battle lasted 3 hours and resulted in the death of Justo Esquives, the first Puerto Rican soldier to die in the Puerto Rican Campaign. Camino was awarded the Cruz de la Orden de Mérito Militar First Class for his actions, after causing much damage to the Spanish defenses and receiving minor damage, low on coal and ammunition. Sampson ordered a ceasefire and returned to Havana, Cuba, and then on to Key West, Florida for repairs and supplies. Second Battle of San Juan on June 22, 1898. The US St. Paul under the command of Captain Charles Sigsbee arrived at San Juan Bay from Cuba and joined the blockade. Shortly after midday, the old Spanish cruiser Isabel II set off from San Juan to engage the St. Paul with support from shore batteries. Isabel opened fire on St. Paul at long range without success in an attempt to break the blockade. Terra, a Spanish destroyer docked in San Juan for repairs, attempted to cover the cruiser's escape with a torpedo attack but was thwarted when her rudder was damaged by a direct hit from the St. Paul. Losing steerage, Terra inadvertently turned broadside, allowing St. Paul to score direct hits near Terra's waterline, disabling one of her engines and causing her to list. Terra abandoned the attack and returned to port, followed by Isabel II. On June 26, St. Paul was relieved by Yosemite, which continued the blockade of San Juan Bay. Third Battle of San Juan on June 28, 1898. The American auxiliary cruiser Yosemite fought with a squadron of Spanish warships. This squadron consisted of 1 cruiser, 2 gunboats and 1 blockade runner. During the engagement, the SS Antonio Lopez, a transoceanic steamer belonging to the Compañía Transatlantica Española carrying a cargo of needed military supplies, was pursued by Yosemite until the Spanish freighter ran aground at Ensenada, Honda, Puerto Rico with her valuable cargo. Captain Carmino was in charge of retrieving the ship's cargo, and the men under his command quickly removed as much of the stranded ship's cargo as possible. The desperate efforts proved fruitful, and nearly the entire cargo was salvaged from the hulk, with only minor articles and a cannon that had fallen overboard during salvage attempts being lost. On the 15th of July, the cruiser US New Orleans arrived to relieve Yosemite, and they quickly finished off the Antonio Lopez the next day by firing 20 incendiary shells into the vessel and sinking it. Though Antonio Lopez had been sunk, her cargo was successfully delivered and ensured that any American assault on San Juan would be met with stronger resistance. Carmino was awarded the Cruz de la Orden de Mérito Naval by the Spanish government. The residents of San Juan were furious with Captain Rivero Mende and blamed him for the destruction wreaked on the city by American bombardments. Nothing came of those recriminations, and Captain Rivero Mende was ordered to turn over the keys of all the military installations in San Juan to Captain Henry A. Reed of the U.S. Army after the Treaty of Paris of 1898 was signed.